is a pretty good turnout for Blackfin. Blackfin hasn't been, normally it's probably the smallest attendance that we've had, but I think based off of last year's season and some of the pictures and how early those pictures came out as opposed to how much later in the season it normally started, there was a big push for it. We have one of our team members that works here. She's been here for 6 years. Her son is like Tim was back in the day. He's a pier rat. And he sent text messages over, and at 8 o'clock in the morning, he was holding, I don't know how he was doing it, but he's a strong kid. He was holding 3 25-pound blackfins off of the pier last year, and that was early in the season. So it's really exciting to think that you could literally go out in an aluminum boat in a north wind, right? Because it's wintertime. And catch tuna fish off of our beaches, not even a mile offshore in some cases.
Paddleboards last year.
Yeah. Paddleboards, right?
This spring, there was several of the guys that had 3 or 4 in a day off paddleboards.
Right.
Because we get that spring run as well as the fall run.
Fallon, you want to come up here? I'm going to introduce you to everybody. So, and it's just only because you said, because it's, you know, there's no matter what kind of boat you're in, there's always something that you have to deal with, right? And so when Fallon, I'd like to introduce her. She came to us from Louisiana. She lived her whole life there. If you ever talk to her, you'll know it instantly. She is definitely from South Louisiana, and she also she looks at paddle boards and she says, "I'll up you one. I'm a yoga instructor on paddle boards." So she can do it upside down. So that's what you got to do this year. Oh, wow. Okay. Blackfin tuna on a paddleboard doing yoga. But you guys are going to know her for a long time. She's going to help with all of our events. So you guys give her a warm first day applause. Legendary Marine. But anyhow, I'm super excited about this. We have a ton of chairs. We have a ton of pizza. So thank you, Mark. Thank you, Tim. You guys keep doing it.
Well, thanks to everybody for coming out tonight. And, you know, like Todd said, you know, a lot of the tunas that they caught paddleboard fishing out, I don't know if y'all following our pages and stuff in the springtime, but they're kind of like the last week of February or so. The Navarre Pier had several days where they were catching 25 or 30 blackfins a day off the pier. So this is definitely not a species that you have to get way offshore. You know, early, you know, in the heat right now, the further you go, I think the better you're going to be. But as it cools down, you know, these fish are going to get much, much closer to the beach. You know, we fish in the rodeo, so we're in the 25 and under charter division, and Mark he's a state guide boat, so we fish well, you know, we're always inside that 9-mile range doing our tuna fishing and stuff. And how many did we have last year during the rodeo? 20?
Yeah, I think I had at least 6 off one spot, a couple, 3 miles off the beach?
Yeah.
Just in October.
And the techniques for the nearshore blackfin and the offshore blackfin, they don't really change. It's the same technique. And the full moon coming up this weekend is kind of the true start of the blackfin fishing. You know, this week, I think it was Sunday, I know one boat that had 4 on Sunday, one boat that had 2, and one boat that had 1, and then there was a couple boats that didn't have any. We went today, of course, and tried to run some down. I know that we hooked 2, I think we hooked 3 that we broke off. You know, in the tunas, especially early until the water cools off some and some of the bonitas go away, they're going to be mixed in with the bonitas. So we had to catch about 400,619
we? What do you
bonitas.
mean we had to catch that many bonitas?
Okay, you, Josh, and...
I'm so sore and tired.
We did catch, we caught a lot, Justin, we caught a lot of bonitas today, and we caught some Jurassic Park bonitas. I think we had 2 that were pushing 15 pound bonitas, so we definitely had some Jurassic Park size ones. As far as bait, we had a good variety of bait today. We were fishing right on the east lip of the pass, and we had little cigar minnows, we had big cigar minnows, little herring, big herring,
Jacks.
and all kind of little hardtails. So we had a real good variety of bait, and bait was real. Finally, bait has gotten easy to catch again, and because these, I don't know about y'all, but the last 3 or 4 weeks for me have been miserable catching bait.
Yeah, it's there. It's been harder to find.
Yeah. But you know, let's see. You know, we're going to cover, you know, trolling, live baiting, chumming, and jigging. Oh, and the very last one will be, if we have time, we'll cover some shotgunning and for tunas. It's a really cool way of fishing for them. Hopefully we'll have some time to get to that. But these are all pictures from last year during the rodeo.
It was a good day.
Yeah. As far as tackle, you know, this isn't, you know, a lot of things that we do, we need very specialized tackle, but for this, you know, the rods and reels are basically fairly basic. You know, you just need some heavy spinning gear, spool with some 50 or 65 pound braid, and you want if you're running a true leader, your top shot doesn't have to be that long, but on my rigs, I just run about a 25-foot piece of 60-pound mono top shot, and I'm just tying straight to that.
This is the one I was actually using today.
You should show them your knot from today.
It held. So, I tied an FG today while we were running about 45 miles an hour. So, it's still there after everything we did today, so it works.
And what did that leader start out at? 20 feet before when you first tied that one?
Yeah, probably.
And we're down to about 5 feet. That's how many hooks we lost to the bonitas today. But to me, this is just a super fun fish because, you know, you got a fish that's really good to eat that we don't really, you know, today we were 36 miles from home when we turned around today, but we were going out in the deeper water looking for the fish today. Every day, those fish will get closer and closer and closer, and I know some of the boats that caught them this weekend were well within sight of state waters also. So you don't have to go that far.
Especially once the water cools off.
Right. And the way the moons are going to fall this year, I think we're going to catch them well into November and maybe even early December. We should catch them pretty late into the year, especially if the weather holds up.
And last year it just seemed to last from, I think my first one was late September.
Yeah.
And it seemed to me like Blackfin lasted until May. Like there may have been a lull around the holidays, but I feel like that could be a result of not as many boats being out anyway.
Yeah.
And then pick back up in the spring when everyone got excited. So I think they were here the whole time.
Yeah. If the water temperature doesn't get too cold, they'll stay. I think the latest that I can ever, you know, we haven't always had blackfins like this. Back when I was a kid, we caught them, but we only just caught a few. And then we would see them at the pier when I was a kid, but we didn't really catch them at the pier. The boats caught a few, but we would catch one every 2 or 3 years at the pier. Maybe one year we catch 4 or 5. Well, in 1985, we had Hurricane Elena. And then something changed, something happened after Hurricane Elena. And it was not uncommon at all to catch 10 or 20 a day off the pier, and some days we caught as many as 100. I've caught 3 in a day twice off the pier. And then in 2004, we had Hurricane Opal. And after Opal, the tunas they quit coming to the pier in those kind of numbers, even though they were just offshore a couple of miles in those numbers. They weren't really coming to the pier, and now the pier, you know, they're catching more than when we were kids, but they're not having those 100 fish days at the pier. But, you know, we have several of our charter boats that, I mean, their rodeo fishing is nothing. I know of 2 charter boats that will do nothing but blackfin tuna fish for every single day of the rodeo. That's their gig. And
I don't blame them because I mean when it works, you're probably going to catch something, whether it's king mackerel, bonitas. You're going to catch something. It's fun. It's a wild moment when it hits, and if you do get a blackfin, it's delicious.
Yeah.
So.
And you know, today, like I say, our goal was blackfins, but we ended up with amberjacks, almaco jacks, cobia, mingos. You know, we did some other things while we were tuna fishing. So just to make sure that we were going to end up with a box of fish anyway. So super, super easy kind of fishing.
Yeah.
So we kind of talked about rods and reels. You know, leader material, definitely on these guys, you know.
Not 20 pound.
Yeah, not 20 pound, but that's just happened to be a picture. But fluorocarbon leaders, whether it's the Yozuri fluorocarbon, Seagar, one of the pure fluorocarbons is what you want to be making your leaders out of. You know, fluorocarbon was invented for the tuna fishery. That's where it all came about because they have such good eyesight. I mean, they can see everything. So this, you know, sometimes we tell you that fluorocarbon isn't so necessary and save your money. This is one of the times where you really, really want to be fishing with fluorocarbon. It will make a difference in how many you catch. You know, you want to do live baiting first or trolling first?
You know, you already know the answer to that. I don't troll.
Well, why don't we just get trolling out of the way?
Okay,
then?
all right.
That way it'll just be out of the way. We won't have to deal with it.
All right. I before we do that, I'm writing an article on blackfin tuna for Florida Sport Fishing Magazine, and in doing so, I did a whole research project on blackfin tuna and where they came from and all that stuff. Do you guys care about that at all? Any of the biology on that fish? Those fish spawn in the Gulf. They're one of the only tunas that have a limited range, and they've caught them as far south as Brazil to Massachusetts. That's it for the blackfin. So they're here. They don't go far, and they all spawn in the Gulf from what the data says.
Well, you know, the bluefins do too. We are the bluefin hatchery, and that's why we only get 5,000 pounds of total bluefin in the Gulf of Mexico every year, because the bluefin for the entire Atlantic Ocean, they're bred in the DeSoto Canyon.
And see, but those are big enough to get up and leave. Other things eat blackfin, so they don't make it too far from here. I mean, there's Pacific blackfin. It's a different type of fish over there, but they have other stuff. But they spawn in the Gulf of Mexico because of all of the nutrients coming out of the Mississippi River. Because a fast fish like a tuna especially in like a larval stage, needs a lot of food. So they're in the Gulf, which kind of keeps me excited because I know that they're there, but when are they coming in? And I don't know unless I go look every single day.
Yeah.
Or read Tim's fishing report, which is probably my...
And like Mark says, he's writing this article for one of the magazines right now. And everything that we're going to cover tonight, both on the trolling and the chumming and live baiting side, I've done posts on our Facebook page here in the last couple of weeks. Basically, we'll cover those Facebook posts. So if you forget anything or we miss something, that's all going to be covered on those two Facebook posts also.
For sure.
There's two different ones. But, the trolling forum is very, everybody in here probably can troll for king mackerel. The only real difference between trolling for tunas and trolling for mackerels is that, a lot of times with the kings, we definitely want a couple things on top, a couple things at mid-depth, and a couple baits of some sort running at depth. For the tunas, it's pretty much a surface bite. You can run some of the Rapala lures that have a small lip on them. They're only going to go, 5 or 6 feet deep anyway, unless you put a trolling lead on there. But for the most part, the trolling for the tunas is a surface bite, and having the birds, whether it's the tormentor bird or the play action bird, either one, and a couple small skirted baits running behind those birds, that's a good way of attracting the tunas up to the surface and behind the boat. The Nomad rig comes, it comes out of the package ready to go. You can just pretty much tie that on. But the trolling is very, very simple. It's just like king mackerel trolling. The only difference is for kings, we're going to typically troll in that 3 to 5 knot range. 5 is kind of pushing it for kings. For the tunas, it's more 4 to 7 knots. It's quicker. And all the inshore places, the Southeast Rocks, the Broken Bottom, Frangista Reef, the 18s and the Nicky Grounds, the Pole Spot, all of those places, as the weather cools, will hold tunas. Generally the best time, first 2 hours of daylight, last 2 hours of daylight, and kind of right midday. Mid-morning and mid-afternoon are typically not as good as that super early, super late, and midday bite on tunas. But like I say, yes, sir.
That Nomad design you just pointed out,
Yeah,
would you just tie that straight on your braid? Or
You would want to have a snap swivel
okay.
and hook it on with this. It comes with just a little loop on the end with a loop protector, and you would want to have a snap swivel there.
Okay.
Something to protect it just a little bit. But, any of the typical king mackerel style lures will work good for that. Cedar plugs all work good. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on the trolling aspect because it's something that I think most of us all do with king mackerel trolling and stuff. And it's very similar to that. But this whole live baiting and chunking and chumming thing, trolling is good sometimes to locate fish, but once you get a bite, you definitely want to stick to that area. And that's when I would get into my chumming for them. And it's a much more effective way to get them to come up to the boat and entice a bite.
And it's fun.
And it's fun.
I shouldn't say it on camera, but how many times did we do it today? And you and I kept laughing at each other every single time somebody said it. I look for this moment on my boat called the snap moment, where everyone's like, oh no, what do I do? Like, that's the whole point of it, and that's tuna fishing with chum, especially.
Yeah, because the bites, it's awesome. When you're trolling, you get a bite and the rod's going, but when you're sitting there in the boat, you're just sitting there with your trolling motor or holding up with Helmmaster or whatever, the bite becomes very violent. It's not just, tunas will come up, and if you have a bait up on the surface, they'll come up and it sounds like almost somebody, even the blackfins will make this noise when it's calm out, and it sounds like someone's flushing the toilet. And this huge sound goes off, and then it's just, and generally speaking, if you have 2 or 3 baits out, you're going to end up with 2 or 3 on at a time, and that's what the bonitas did to us today. I'd look up there, and Josh is over here, and Taylor's over here, and Mark's on the front of the boat, and all 3 of them have got one on, and one's under the boat over here, and the next one's under the boat and around this one and back here, and I'm having to just I'm sitting there holding up with the Helmmaster EX system and just using fish point, and I'd have to take it out of gear and just basically stop everything because some of them are going towards the motors whether I wanted them to or not. And it was knit 1, pearl 2. Mark's over here trying to direct traffic with the guys.
I got stuck between a rod and the gunnel at one point. So it was funny. 2 of us had bonitas on, but then one of them was definitely a tuna. And poor Josh was just holding on to the rod. Like, what do we do? And Tim's famous saying, well, if you're going to try to tighten the drag, you might as well do it while you have a chance, came out, and then he's going like this. And
well, it was at the point we were out of line, so it didn't really matter if we tightened it at that point or not, because there was no line left on the reel.
That's awesome.
So, but that, you know,
What kind of gear do you troll with for tuna? Same stuff you'd use for kings?
yeah, spinning rods, conventional rods, I don't think it really matters. You know, you can live bait troll for them, if you, which is a good effective way of doing it. If you're going to live bait troll for them, I'm gonna pass this leader around.
Gotcha.
This is exactly how we would make a leader for king mackerel fit for live bait and for kings, but it's made out of mono. You can put a little piece of steel between the front hook and the trailing hook and get some tuna bites. If you use steel throughout the whole leader, you are going to greatly limit the amount of tuna bites you get. The unfortunate thing about this rig is just the same places that we catch tunas are the same places the king mackerel live. You are going to lose hooks, whether you run them naked, with dusters, whatever, you're going to lose some rigs to king mackerels. But I will trade a little bit of fluorocarbon and a few hooks to be able to get tuna bites. You know, I think by this time of year, most of us have probably all caught enough kings that we have plenty for the smoker and may not need any more other than trying to win the rodeo. And if we're going to do that, I would go offshore and troll bigger baits anyway. But the rig is just like a, you know, just like a king mackerel rig that's going around. That's the one we're passing around. When we are chumming and live baiting at the same time, we need rigs at different depths, because a lot of times when we're trolling, most of the bites are going to come on the surface, but with tunas, a lot of times the first bite may come deeper. And there's several ways to do this. You can make a leader that's about 25 feet long and then have your lead up at the top of that with a swivel. That's, you know, the rig I throw off the back of the boat just for the fly line rig, it's just going to have a hook on it. But to get it down deep, we have to have some way of attaching a lead to it. Most everybody fishes just a much longer leader, a 20 or 25 foot leader, and then has their three-way swivel attached there and the lead. Well, the problem is that gets to the boat, the lead's at the tip of the rod, the tuna's still 20 or 25 feet away from you.
Which we had today. We had one tuna bite on that setup, and then our cobia came off of that too.
And it was kind of my fault. It kind of was a little messed up. I actually forgot rubber bands today. You can take a number 32 rubber band. I'll wrap one on there first. So you can take a rubber band, go around your leader, and I'm doing this just a few feet from the hook for demonstration.
That would have been nice today.
But if you have this about 25 feet up the leader,
Yeah, we got in trouble with that today. We were, that weight came up, and everyone was so excited to see what it was, because we were all yelling that it was a cobia. And then I'm standing there with a gaff in one hand and the weight in the other, and the fish was 25 feet away from me. and everyone's looking over the side. So, well, you figure out what happened. We landed it anyway.
But at this point, even if this was 20 or 25 feet long, when this gets up to the boat and the lead's in your way, I can pop this and just keep on reeling and reel that broken rubber band in the rod. It'll come off. But you just reach up and snap the lead off. That's the cool thing about the rubber band trick versus the snap rig like we use for bottom fishing, because there's no way to reel that swivel into the tip, but you can just grab it and snap it right off. But I forgot rubber bands this morning. I thought they were in my tackle bag, and they were sitting on the rigging bench at the house, and they didn't make it to the boat. But it's just, if you've trolled for marlin or anything, you know, any kind of offshore trolling, it's just like doing that, where you're going to hook the rubber band into your outrigger. You wrap it around the line 3 or 4 times, run it through itself, pull it tight, and that's going to hold that lead in place. And then if it was on your outrigger and you're trolling, well, the fish would hit it and just snap the rubber band, and then you get the bite. So we're doing basically the same thing. We just take it off when we get a boat. You all right there?
Okay. I love tuna fishing.
Are you sure?
I can't believe you forgot the rubber bands.
Didn't choke you up that bad that I
Okay.
forgot the rubber band.
I'm back.
Whew. But, you know, a number 32 rubber band is probably the size you want. The 16s are a little bit light. You'll lose some of your leads. 64 size rubber bands, when you go to pull it, sometimes it won't snap really easy. But you want to be able to just grab that lead and just snap it off, so you can just keep on reeling. That way the hook will come all the way up to your rod.
That would have helped today.
You know, if you want to make the deep water rig, you know, it's a 3-way swivel with 25 foot a leader to whatever rig that you're going to have at the end of it. You know, baits like we talked about, cigar minnows, herring. Menhaden are great tuna baits if you want to take the time to cast net them in the bay. And then, like I say, if we're trolling and you catch one, that's when you want to start chumming. You know, turn the boat off, put your trolling motor on, sit down, you know, get you some herring, you know, don't buy cigar minnows for chum while they work good. They're too, you know, cigar minnows now are $24 a box. Herring, northern mackerel, even ballyhoo are cheaper than cigar minnows now. And any of that works great for cutting up and making chum out of. And most of them are about half the price. You know, they're $12 to $15 a box instead of $23, $24 a box for bait. So I would always use something else, unless you just happen to have an excess of cigar minnows that you caught up and didn't use, you know, from weeks before. But
And I'll do that at the end of the day, especially during summer, during snapper season, when I'm buying bait from the bait guys. All that leftover bait at the end of the day, I throw it in a bag and I freeze it all.
yeah.
That's exactly what it's for, is for chum later.
And then something that you should be doing anyway for your snapper, grouper fishing, chumming, whatever. When you catch
remora fishing.
yeah. You know, right now there's a ton of bonitas out there. Bonita strips are as good a snapper and grouper bait as you can ever have. Little bonita chunks for triggerfish and mingo fishing work great. So we normally keep some of the bonitas every day and process them, just put them up in freezer bags just like we would our fish, and have those for the next time we go out. I've always got a couple dozen bags of bonita in the freezer. If you're going to use, you know, and especially for mingos and triggers, you know, I know that's what we're not covering tonight, but for mingos and triggers, if you'll salt this bonita down, just cake it in salt before you freeze it, it will get a lot tougher and stay on the hook much, much better. When I was a kid, when I was working on a charter boat, Dr. Aim, I'm sure will remember this because he's been around that long, but we would take 5-gallon buckets, and it was a layer of salt, a layer of ladyfish fillets, layer of salt, layer of ladyfish, layer of salt, layer of ladyfish, put the lid on it, sit it down below, and let that basically ferment for a couple months. And the smell will knock you over, but the ladyfish pieces would just get super, super tough. And that's what we used for triggers and mingos back then, but same principle with the bonita strips. So
it helps a lot on my boat with guys. And I'll see the rods. The rods we use are so light. You'll see, excuse me, you'll see the rods get hit. I'm like, man, I think you guys are bit off. Your bait's gone. But these, the way I word it, I'm like, you'll get 2 or 3 shots at a fish with that.
Yeah. But it works great for chumming for blackfins, and it's inexpensive chum. You're going to catch bonitas anyway. You might as well be processing some of those up. Of course, we already mentioned ballyhoo. This is probably the one bait that almost no one uses for blackfins around here. When you cut a blackfin open, or any tuna for that matter, whether it's blackfin, yellowfin, bonita, skipjack tuna, when they're going along these weed lines, they're actually eating rock shrimp, but they love shrimp. There's days when we'll catch more on live shrimp than we will on other baits. They adore shrimp.
It's a really good point to bring up, and we were talking about this last time too, because of the black snapper bite that we had. And once we started catching certain fish, and we were doing dumb stuff and trying to catch them on fly rods, but we were trying to figure out what kind of patterns to use. And I almost always recommend cutting that fish open to see what it's feeding on, and you'll be shocked. Like we had bonitas that had whole squid in them that were like that big on last week, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't worry about me.
But, so secret bait, especially, when we get shrimp, we order 1,000 live shrimp. And our shrimp tanks have been broken for, 2 months now. Our holding tank that's underground that holds our spare water, it was 25 years old and had developed so many leaks we had to replace it. I actually ordered a new tank back in July. It just came in last week, and we pretty much got it replumbed in, and we should be back up and running on shrimp here soon. Destin Marina has been having shrimp pretty regular though, until we get up and running. Unfortunately, we order shrimp we order 1,000 shrimp or 5,000 shrimp, but we never know if we're going to get little ones or big ones or medium ones. We just kind of get whatever God produces that day and the shrimpers happen to catch. But in the fall time, the shrimp are typically a little bigger than they are in the spring. So we do have some really good size ones a lot of times in the fall, and they make excellent, excellent blackfin baits.
Great baits for everything. I mean, look at where the fish are in the water column. What do you think they're feeding on? They're not feeding on all that same stuff that the groupers are.
Yeah. But, and if you are going to do the live bait and chum thing, I would have one rod out. You don't want to fish so many rods that you're going to get just complete and utter tangles. But I think on most people's boats, 3 rods is probably about good. But one rod where you have nothing but your 25 foot a leader with a circle hook on it. That one we're going to pitch out. That one's just going to be a straight flat line rig.
Where do you hook that fish?
So generally speaking, I like to hook my baits in the eyes, but occasionally, the only one that I will hook in the tail occasionally is the hardtails. Because you hook a hardtail in the tail and he just goes.
So a nose hooked, cigar minnow, herring,
Yep.
whatever. What are your other 2?
So you got
This
nose
off the
hook.
back.
Say again?
You had 3 rods, right?
Right. So one is a flatline rod. One I would have where I probably had an egg sinker on it with like just a 1 ounce egg sinker that could slide all the way down to the hook. So I got one that's on the surface. I got one that has a 1 ounce egg sinker on it. And the current and the wind and everything normally won't ever let that one get more than about 20 or 25 feet deep. It's only going to get so far down. And then your other one is going to have the rubber band rig on it or the longer leader on a swivel. And then that one probably going to have, you know, a 6 or 8 ounce lead, and I'm going to run it whatever the depth is to the bottom. I'm going to run it. If I'm in 300 feet, I'm going to put it 150. If I'm in 50 feet of water, I'm going to put it at 25 foot. So I got one at 0, one at 20, and one reasonably deep.
And you're throwing chum over, but not too much to fill them up.
And not so much to attract 4,000 sharks.
And then you'll sit there and wait for like 15 minutes. You'll start looking at your phone for the next spot to go to. I'll start jigging. A school of fish will swim by and every rod will get hit at the same time.
Which is exactly why, you know, if you're going to go out there and strictly chum and live bait fish for them. Mark asked me this today because I was getting antsy at one point. He goes, if we were doing the seminar right now, how long would you tell people they need to sit on a spot? You need to sit there for an hour. If you haven't caught them in an hour, you can go to the next one. But give it an hour for the chum to work and the fish to come and find you, because they're going to need to come find you.
It's difficult for me because I'm on a charter every day and I drive a long way around and people are expecting to catch fish, and sometimes sitting there and waiting for an hour is really uncomfortable. And I tell them every time, I'm like, we're supposed to sit here for an hour. Don't let me drive away. And about 15 minutes into it, I start looking on my chart to figure out where I'm going next every single time. So today I specifically asked you, and I knew you were going to say an hour, but today on the boat you were like, that was 30 minutes. Yeah. I don't last that long normally. But that's the tricky part when you're kind of time constrained and you're looking for something where I'm supposed to find something, which makes it harder.
And most of the time, you're going to find the fish are, they're going to hang out over wrecks and reefs and natural bottom, all the places that we would snapper, grouper, or amberjack fish. You know, we didn't go out there today. There was nothing in the plan today that said that I ever had that I thought we were going to come home with jacks, amberjacks, almaco jacks, mingo snappers, and a cobia. I mean, we were going for tunas, but we managed to catch all of those as bycatch while we were catching tunas.
What about sorry, I'm probably stealing your train of thought. Remember, it was April, when we were fishing a wreck west of here on the flat line, and we could have sworn it was a tuna with Lonnie. Could have sworn it was a tuna, and that was a pretty big amberjack too on the surface.
So you never know what you're going to. Any of the species that are out there are apt to bite while you're doing this whole tuna thing. So you should be able to make a box of fish on a day when you don't catch a tuna, just like we did today.
I mean, it's just like king mackerel fishing though. Like, you could go out looking specifically for king mackerel and you could troll for them, you can do whatever you want. But I feel like most people king mackerel fish off of a flat line while they're doing other stuff.
Yeah. Other than the rodeo.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
You're talking about chumming. Let me ask you, if you could be a little more specific on like the rate, and are you right on the wreck? Because I've done that several times, and within 30 seconds, it's 8,000 triggers. And I don't see where the chum can be effective, but maybe it is because they smell it. I don't know. Are you up current? Or are you just outside the wreck? What kind of?
You kind of want your chum. You kind of want to be. You want your chum moving off the wreck. So. And we cut up 2 baits and throw a handful over. And 3 or 4 minutes later, maybe not, that might not be that might be a little bit too fast, but 5 minutes later, cut up a couple more, throw them over, and then all of a sudden you're going to get busy, and now it's going to have been 10 minutes and you haven't thrown any over again. And if you're good with the cast net, if you stop in the bay, when them little menhaden are back in there, I'd catch as many of them as I can. If you have 2 live wells, I'd fill one live well with live ones and have a 5-gallon bucket. Throw them over, throw some dead ones over, grab 5 or 6 live ones, just throw them over. They work super good for chum. Excellent, excellent chum. Chum, you can actually do the chum balls like we do for snappers and stuff. Chum balls can be very effective. I don't think there's any wrong way to chum for them. You will, like I say, you'll attract some sharks, because at one time today, we had to have 4, 5, 6, just.
They were big.
You did not want to fall over. Falling over would have been bad. So I'll let you talk about jigging.
So, me personally, I can't sit still and wait like that, especially with people on the boat, especially because I like to jig. We like to throw our flat lines off the back. I think it's difficult to run 2 flat lines and a lower one unless we're fishing deeper water, because depending on the jig, you're going to have some current action, you're going to have jigs moving back and forth, and worst case scenario, you hook up and then you're trying to reel in a 150-foot down lead that might have a fish on it or anything too. So sometimes I have trouble managing lines down at the same time. But for me, I love dropping jigs. I don't know how else to say it. I've said it at every single seminar. These things catch everything. You can work them fast or slow. And the best part about jigging is, and some of you guys know I say this every single time, there's no wrong way to jig. Like some days they like it moving fast, some days they like it moving slow, some days they like it in a rod holder with just a boat rocking up and down and the jig just kind of barely moving. So for me, I like to keep my charters interesting. I like to keep people engaged. I like to keep that action. Hopefully a flat line gets hit, but when you're working a jig in the right way and or the wrong way, really, I don't know, and then it gets hit, we didn't bring a jigging rod, did we?
Not a true jigging rod, but so we have slow pitch jigs. We have flat fall jigs. We have monarch jigs.
Yeah.
We have shimmer falls, which are the long, skinny ones. And we hold the Colt snipers. Kind of like Mark said, that there's no wrong way to jig. For tunas, there's not a wrong jig. And if you're getting bites, trolling or chumming and live baiting, and you want to catch some jigging because it's a fun way of doing it, there's not a wrong jig, and you may have to try 2 or 3 different ones to find out which one they're going to bite that day, because each day will be different. If there's one consistent that I can tell you about jigs, as long as it has the word glow in it somewhere, that's a good one. Yes, sir.
Weight with the depth of the water and all that stuff? Do you have a specific weight that you like, or 2 of them?
Right. So the gentleman's question was, what weight do you use? Right. So the answer to that is, you want the lightest, just like bottom fishing. Everybody says, what size lead do I need for snappers or groupers? Doesn't matter the species. I want the lightest one possible that I can drop it and it stays straight up and down. And some days that might, they do them in grams, but some days that might be an 80-gram jig, and some days that might be a 250-gram jig. The deeper the water, the more current there is, the more wind there is, but you need to be able to drop the jig and pick it up and drop it. Pick it up and drop it, and it stays right there. If it's over there, it's too light. When you're jigging and it's over there, it's not doing what it's designed to do. It needs to be able to jig straight up and down. Agree, disagree?
Yeah, and I've changed how I rig my jigs up. I mean, if you know much about slow pitch jigging, it's kind of where you hook it. Like you don't hook it to the jig, you hook it on the hook. So I've kind of changed how I manage my jigs and hook directly to the solid rings, and then I can just leave the solid rings on my rod on a guide, and then adjust with the split ring. Take the jig off of the split ring, throw it down, put a different jig on the same split ring, so you can change them out real fast. And I can show you. I'm probably wording that in a weird way, but they all have a split ring on them that connects the solid ring to the hook. So that way, and I don't have to worry about this swinging around on the boat. Like today, we were trying to find some Velcro because I was afraid this was going to come over and hook me, because that boat went entirely too fast. I'm not used to that. But I like,
ran it slow coming home. We only ran 40 miles an hour.
I mean, it's the same thing, and it's funny because we talked about this a lot. Like I did all this background in biology and all this stuff about the blackfin and try to sound super cool in my article. And then I texted Tim and I said, I should have just said, it's kingfishing, but with fluorocarbon. So, I mean, if you've hooked a king on a jig, I mean, they just like shiny, fast moving. Although sometimes they like it sitting still, just floating there. I don't know. But when you hook one on one of these, it's pretty awesome. Yes, sir. The question was how fast do you troll?
Generally at 4 to 6, maybe even as fast as 7 knots. It's a little faster than king mackerel speed because they're very aggressive fish, and if you're going too slow, a lot of times they'll get disinterested. Any more questions right now? Yes, sir.
As far as where you troll, you always make your way to a wreck or some kind of bottom, or you just go out the pass, throw your spread out, and just make your way down the beach, and maybe toward some fishing spots, or just trolling in open water without a specific weight point that you're driving to. Can you catch tuna
Yeah.
in open water?
So the question is, can you catch tunas in open water, or do you need to be around a reef? Generally speaking, I would say you're much better off fishing around a reef, a wreck, a ledge, something that holds bait to attract the fish. With tunas, unlike king mackerel, you can more or less troll from place to place if you got places that are like if you got a string of stuff that you know where there's some rocks that are half a mile apart, or even maybe as much as a mile, you can probably troll between those because you can troll faster for tunas. So you're really not in open water that long a period of time. At king mackerel live bait speed, it would take you 20 minutes to go a mile. So in that case, I would just pick up and run to the next spot. But for tunas, you can go from troll from spot to spot. If you got places that are half a mile apart, definitely. Push anything more than a mile is probably pushing it.
You mentioned a few times at the beginning about water cooling down. You got some temperatures. I don't know if that's it.
You know, the magic temperature in the spring to catch king mackerels is 68. I don't think any of us are expert enough to know what the magic temperatures are on tunas because we haven't been doing it long enough, but they will be there in much cooler water, and they prefer it a little cooler. I don't think that 62 is too low. I think 58 is too low. Some years our water never gets to the 50s. And they don't like the water extremely hot either. They'll get lethargic when it gets hot. But I think that if I had to just pin me down and say, okay, what would you say? 62 to 78 would probably be about prime temperature.
And it's 87 right now. So, which is interesting to me because in doing all that, when I moved here, my background is in math. And when I moved here, I started to try to pattern everything I could. I tried to figure out everything I could. There's no sense in fishing at all. The more I learn, I realize the less I know. But the legend or the whatever you want to call it, they said the last moon phase in August is what, and so it's funny, like you look at some of these things like the last moon phase in August, and I'll be damned if tuna haven't started showing up on Instagram and Facebook in the last like 10 days, I feel like just randomly popped up. And I don't know if it has something to do with if they spawn on the moon.
Well, I know back in the day on the pier fishing days, the best pier fishing days were the 3 days before and after the full moon and the new moon. That was always when we had our best days on the pier.
It's like during snapper season, the bites, and if you look at where we were catching fish, it wasn't on the bottom, on the reef, on the full moon, and even on the new moon days, It got weird. The fish were up in the middle of the water column, way off, like a long way.
Could be as far as anywhere from 100 to 300 feet off the wreck.
Yeah, like way down current, up in the middle of the water column, which they say is where red snapper spawn. Up high in the water to release everything out over the sand and let their fish drift away or let the eggs drift away and whatever. So I think moon phases have a lot to do with it, and I think from your knowledge and the research that I've done, it was always last moon phase in August.
That's when it gets good. Or starts anyway.
So I think the goal of the seminars this year was to try to beat the seasons, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is perfect.
Yeah.
Which is why today was the first time we've gone out specifically tuna fishing.
Yeah.
I really wanted to bring a tuna tonight. Just throw it out and be like, here's your seminar. I lost it. Yeah, exactly. It's Tim's fault.
So there is one other method to catch tunas.
Which is awesome.
This one's really fun. It's probably not the most productive way, but it's really cool. In the fall, the water starts to cool, we will start to get schools of ballyhoo up on the beaches. And when I say beaches, in that, half a mile to 4 or 5 miles off the beach, there'll be these schools of ballyhoo. And when we caught them off the piers, this is what would happen is the tunas would start chasing the schools of ballyhoo. And our ballyhoo are different. Don't think, you got the ballyhoo that we buy, that y'all come and get in packages at the store. Those are true ballyhoo. These are a little different. We call them greenies. You can actually go out on Crab Island sometimes at night and go along with a flounder light and dip net them up. They're a little smaller and they're kind of an iridescent looking little ballyhoo, but they'll be all up and down the beaches. And super early, they almost never do this during midday. This is the first 2 hours of daylight and the last 2 hours. But the tunas will be racing up and down the beach, and these schools of ballyhoo are just run this way, and then they run over here, and they run over here. And the bite is just, it's like a redfish coming up and eating a topwater plug, but 40 times, 100 times more violent of a strike. It's really cool. I mean, it's just, you see these tunas, the tunas are right, they're jumping and they're running and jumping and jumping, and the ballyhoo, you never know where they're going to go because the ballyhoo go that way, well, the tunas are going that way. The next time they're going to go that way. There's no random pattern to it. They're just racing up and down the beach eating these ballyhoos. But to me, it's just a fun way of fishing. Like I say, is it probably the most productive way? No.
Yeah, but keep in mind too that
fun.
There's like rodeo fishing, and then there's every other day.
Yeah.
And I don't really even care that much anymore because this is fun.
Yeah.
So it's very, like if I see that, or like the Mahi Day, if that happens, who cares? Because this is the whole point of fishing, in my opinion. Like, we're not fishing for sustenance. I say this every month. I'm like, if we're in here with these boats, like you're not, I mean, it's great to load up the freezer or whatever, but that's not the whole point of this. But to hook even if it's just a bonita, I see so many guys every day hook a fish on a jig or on the surface or something and fight it, and you're trying to tell them how to steer it around and tire that fish out and keep him from getting oxygen over his gills, and it's just fun. They get it to the boat and then they're super disappointed that you can't keep it, or it's something that tastes like rust or something gross. So I mean, that you can tell I'm getting excited about it.
Yeah, I just think it's a cool way of fishing. It's something that we don't get the opportunity to do very much. I mean, if you like topwater fishing for trout and redfish, you'll love this because it's just, you're catching something that's really good to eat and it's just super fun. But
we do that almost every single day. I mean, you guys see it probably every time you're out on the boat. Like, you see those schools of bonita on the surface like that. There is no way I'm driving past white water like that without throwing a jig or something into it.
you know, and mostly this is a popper fishery. You want the regular poppers that have the little blunt noses on them. So when you're chugging it, it's just going across the top of the water. And, you know, they make several different varieties of chuggers. But this particular bait right here, Yo-Zuri makes these, they make little bitty twitch baits for trout and redfish, but this is about a 5 or 6 inch one. It's this guy right here. These will work just as good as the chuggers, and sometimes they'll actually work better. We go out to the rigs and we'll take this one at nighttime. You can just tie it on, throw it as far close to the rig as you can, jig it 2 or 3 times, just take it, stick it in the rod holder. It might be there 20 minutes before yellowfin will come up and crash it and eat it. Those are just tremendous little lures. And they come in, I mean, they come in 4 or 5 different colors that the tuna's like. Can't stress enough, if you don't have these on your boat, you need them. We had 4 today. We could never find one of 4.
Have we lost one? If there wasn't a camera here and it wasn't inappropriate, I would show you the bruise I have from not using one of those today.
But it's, I mean, best rod, you know.
That doesn't feel good.
I hate gut buckets. Oh, I wanted to talk about, this is something I forgot about. Rodeo fishing for tunas. Mark won't like me for this, but if you're going to rodeo fish for tunas, Mark Luciani sitting over here can attest to that. He works on the dock every day during the rodeo. The tuna division is very highly competitive. And the tunas only get so big. Most years, the big ones are 27 to 29 pounds.
World record blackfin's 45.
Yeah. But most years, they're 27 to 29. First, second, third, charter 25 and under, private 25 and under, junior, senior, ladies. They're all going to be, tunas can go on the board in about 15 different places. And between first, second, and third place is going to be ounces. If you gaff your tuna, you're not going to win. If you stick your hands in the tuna gills and bleed them out, you're not going to win.
I'm not saying any names because she's watching and I don't want to sleep on the couch. But we had it weighed 28 on the scale, and by the time we got it to the dock, it was like 26 and a half. And I was like, what happened? I'm like, what's wrong with my scale? And I started looking through the pictures, and I'm not going to say any names, but a woman that I live with had her hands in the gill, like in the gills, and you could just, and I didn't notice until the picture just had blood coming down her hand, and I don't know, maybe that fish wouldn't have won. Maybe it won second place, and I'm happy about it because I wanted to blackfin fish this year. We've had a good track record on bottom fish, and I wanted to get better at something different. So we kind of focused a little differently this year, and we got it. So I was happy, and she's beautiful, and I love her.
And I just had to bring that up. But netting your tunas, you know, if you're just out there, if you're out here all the rest of the time of the year, just gaff your tunas, get them in the boat, because bleeding the tunas out, bleeding any fish out will make it taste better. But during the rodeo, ounces matter. And netting your tunas will make a big difference. It can be the difference, because a few ounces can be the difference between winning and losing.
And I totally agree with that about bleeding them out. I think that's much better for edibility. That was actually that tuna that we're talking about in that picture.
That tuna.
What?
That tuna?
That was also that tuna, I think, but the last one where I smoked it, that one. I think that's the same tuna.
Yes, sir.
Quick question. It says in your the paper here
Uh-huh.
that if you use braid, the bait swims better than if you use mono.
So the question was, are you better using braid or mono? Personally, every rod that you see us fish with is going to have braid. Braid is smaller in diameter, so we can use a heavier pound test and still get sufficient amount of line on the reel. So everything we have, every rod that we have between the two of us has braid on it. Now it may have a mono shock leader, but the actual reel is spooled with braid, and most of the time I'm spooling my spinning reels with either 50 or 65 pound braid.
The bait actually swims better on braid.
Yeah, because on braid, braid is like sewing thread. It's just so floppy that it
And I feel like less hydro resistance, less drag in the water. So that bait, I feel like, and I'm exaggerating here, but if you have a line memory of mono back to your fish, he's probably a little more rigid, and that braid just kind of does what it wants and lets that fish swim around. But for me, I mean, I have braid on everything. I have braid on my sabiki rigs. I have braid on everything. It just feels, I feel like I can feel things better. And when I get on a rod that's not braided, even, and it's like today, the sabiki rigs, I just felt, I was like, I can't feel it the same way, which is weird. And I think, well, that's because I was using your rods. That was a rough day. I'll admit that was tough. But for me,
well, Mark did give you a grouper rod to catch sabikis
yeah,
with.
I mean, I can't sabiki on a broomstick. But for me, I like using braid, and a lot of guys, like Tim will have shock leaders on for some things, but I mean, I fish super light tackle. I like fishing light tackle, and I think where a lot of guys will let the shock leader absorb some of that run, I think my rods will let it happen. So whether the line stretches 4 feet over 100 feet that he's out or whatever, or my rod flexes. This rod's the heaviest rod I have on my boat. But I think that same stretch is absorbed in the rod as opposed to the leader, or the braid, I mean, if that makes any sense. Like that's my rod, but normally for me, this is mine, and if that fish wants to go, I mean, there's so much flex in it, but still enough power where you need it. So,
You know, as far as the blackfins go, I tell you, if you take blackfin and treat it right, ice it, do everything like you would with the yellowfin tuna, it's every bit as good as yellowfin. I mean, flavor-wise, it's just excellent. You know, my recipe for blackfin is super simple. I use about two-thirds part of Italian dressing, 1/3 part of Dale's steak seasoning. Mix that, get it mixed there good together, put the tuna in there, let it marinate for at least an hour. 2 or 3 hours is better. And then, of course, it adds flavor and keeps tuna from drying out. A lot of people will try to cook tuna. I like it grilled myself, and a lot of people will cook it just a little too long and it'll get dry. So what I do to prevent that, plus it adds a lot of flavor, I've soaked it in that marinade for a couple hours. I wrap it with bacon, throw it on the barbecue grill. Oh my God. Super simple, super easy.
We do it a little different. I spent a lot of time in Japan in a different career, and I eat a lot of, I've had a lot of weird food. But for me, for blackfin, bleed it out. If we do go through the whole ikejime process of the brain spike, bleeding it out, and the wire down the spinal column, it's a whole ordeal that we should probably talk about sometime, because it's awesome, and it really changes everything. I think it's humane, and it changes the fish a lot too. Ours, if we have a whole lot, like one day Kayla and I went out, we had 4 live baits, I think. The first one got bit off, the second was a tuna, the third was a tuna, and the fourth got bit off, and we went home. So we ended up with like, I think one was 26 and one was 28 pound. And we went home with 50 pounds of tuna meat, which is way too much. So for us, the picture, you can't really, I don't really like to freeze tuna unless you do it a certain way that's difficult and time consuming, unless I smoke it. So sometimes
I think that was that day.
yeah, we'll take I think we tried to eat as much of this one as we could and give it to our friends, and then we smoked a big part of that one, because I think you can freeze smoked meats, and that doesn't get nearly as weird. But for us, our blackfin, super simple, barely marinate it for just a few minutes, barely sear it on every side, with the recipes on my website too. So, and that's that next picture that you had on there after that smoking one.
Oh, yeah.
This is typically what we do, and this is probably the perk of my job. And I don't often implement the captain's tax on my boat, but if I get to go home and eat that for dinner, I will. Yeah. So what do we have? We have live baits, trolling, chumming, run and gun, jigging. Yeah, we talked a little bit about that. What are we missing?
That's everything that I had on my first little slide.
Basically king mackerel fishing, but with fluoro.
Pretty much. And chumming.
Yeah?
Questions? Yes, sir. Normally, because of the speed that we need to fish for tunas, it's generally better with plugs. It's pretty hard to live bait. You can live bait troll for them, but you need to be at king mackerel speed, or you're just going to drown your live baits. And tunas like the baits going a little faster, so plugs generally work better. Yes, sir.
You guys are live baiting short at the time, and best time to fish bites, first 2 hours of sunlight. You guys catching your live bait the night prior, or the day prior.
So a lot of times we will catch bait the day before and keep it in a pen, but you can catch bait before the sun comes up. You can, if you got a couple spreader lights on the boat, you know, they catch bait at the pier all night long underneath the lights. So you can pull up just right there on the lip where we all catch bait. You can catch bait well before dark, or well before sunup. You know, the live bait boys are out there selling bait. They're selling bait before the sun comes up. They start bait fishing at 3, 4 in the morning. They're bait fishing. Now they're using lights to attract them, but you can definitely catch baits before the sun comes up.
Now, for me, I leave from Santa Rosa Beach every day on my charters. I'm not running across the bay in the dark. So for me, if I leave at 6:37, if I get over to the pass, whatever, I always miss those first 2 hours of daylight. So statistically speaking, I totally agree with Tim. It's better, like every fishing seems to be better in the morning and at night. Right, like first 2 hours and last 2 hours. I don't have that luxury. I fish whenever I can. So I just try it a lot every day, and then every now and then it works. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you do it when you can.
Yeah.
So,
And it's not that they won't bite at other times. Those are just their peak times.
yeah. And I mean, what I like is, especially from like the guys here at the marina, like I'm just thinking of a day last year where I was home. I couldn't believe he was out in the Gulf doing what he was doing, but Todd Broyle called me like early in the morning, like screaming at the top of his lungs, like, "Are you out? Are you out?" And I was like, "No, why?" And he was like, "I'm over here off of Henderson and there's blackfin jumping out of the water everywhere." I was like, "Man, I'll be there in 2.5 hours." So it's just, I mean, it's like everything else. Like we can tell you statistically what makes the most sense, but I think all of my tuna this year, every single fish I caught came between 10 and 2. Every single one. But that's just because I don't have the ability to get all the way over here early or run home in the dark late, because I'm normally out of gas by then.
Any more questions about blackfins?
Yeah, what size top water?
What size top water? 3 to 6 inch top waters. Just a nice size chugger.
I feel like if they're
Yes.
gonna hit it, they don't care. Which jig?
Just it's the flat fall and probably and so long as it says glow, pink glow, blue glow, yellow glow, doesn't matter, says glow. The ugly stripedy ones that say glow.
Ugly? What's ugly about this?
That's a hideous lure,
It's like
but
my-
it
it's my
works great.
favorite. I'm a big fan of the Monarch. It's fun, but I like it because he normally has a flat fall on, and I normally have a Monarch on.
It doesn't really matter. I don't think that one is actually really that superior to the other, as long as it says glow.
I just wanted to ask you guys, I think I put this on the Destin group this summer, but I'd like to get your opinion. So when you're in the Bonita party, as I like to call it, which happened probably half a dozen times this summer, to us, you just wait it out? Or are you looking for anything specific? Because like you said, I mean, once we're 20 Bonitas in, I'm ready to pack it up.
We've blackfin fished today. I think I myself hooked
A lot, 15, 20.
I think I probably hooked 20, and I think one of them was a blackfin. I lost that fish. It fought different. It was bigger, and I was really excited about it. It was probably a blackfin because I lost it, or I tail hooked a bonita. I don't know.
No.
But that's what first thing you said this morning. You were like, "We're gonna have to catch every one of these bonitas until we catch a blackfin."
And the bonitas will start to thin out. As we get into October, the bonitas won't be as big an issue as this month. Your ratio is probably 20 to 1. And as we get into October and November and December, that ratio is going to get much better. It might even get to a 1-to-1 ratio.
I don't think we hooked. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Did you learn anything from the
That's why I
comments?
asked you, because it was a mixed bag. Half the guys were like, after the third one, I'm out of there. Going to the next spot.
We'd had to leave in 3 minutes.
I would have never had my blackfin bite today had we left.
Yeah, we caught 3 bonitas in 3 minutes.
But it was, it was fun though, because it was one of those things where you just kind of, I like to catch fish. Like that's the whole point of this. Like if I needed tuna, I'd go to the market and buy some for $25 and not spend however many $100 in fuel and boat payments and insurance and sea tow and whatever. So for me though, today was pretty awesome because I could put a bait on this and pitch it out, and feed out some line, and then all of a sudden my line would start going off real fast, and I'd say, "Hey guys, watch this." So it was fun until like 25 of them into it, and now I'm.
And we got
back hurts.
45. I had 3 of them fishing, and they all caught the same as many. I mean, like I put in my Facebook post, we caught 400,387. It felt like we caught that many bonitas.
I really
today.
hoped that one time we got all tangled up, I hoped that we could all reel that fish in together because I was getting so tired.
Yes, sir. So
That's
do you prefer watercolor?
Man,
Clean water is always best. I'm somewhat worried about the fall
agreed.
for near shore fishing. The water near shore right now inside that 9-mile range is filthy. And it's because when it rains here, it really doesn't affect us that bad. It's the rain that we get north of us, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, Louisiana, that rain pouring out of the rivers brings all that muddy water in, and the water inshore is dirty. We need, and while we've had some weather, we've had some rain, and we've had a few rough days, we haven't really had a storm of any kind. We need a storm. We need a nice little, tropical storm, little Cat 1 hurricane, something that doesn't tear up everything, but something enough to turn the water over, re-energize, re-oxygenate. That's, you look at nature, tropical storms, hurricanes, those kind of things, they actually clean the environment. And we need that because the water is dirty. But clean water is, you're going to catch more of them in clean water than in dirty water.
I too am nervous for this fall because last year was awesome for Blackfin.
And the dirty water goes out. It's long. You want to get blue water right now? It's Lloyd's Ridge. It's 160, 180 miles. So we need a good little storm. We need a 50, 60 mile an hour tropical storm. That would be perfect.
I talked to a diver today who was diving in 115 feet. He said it was 100 feet before that water cleared up. And sometimes, like last year, they were diving and he said 15 feet below the surface. It was beautiful. But this year he said it was 100, I think he said 105 or something like that.
Yes, sir.
No.
No. The question was, will the rodeo do red snapper for their weekends? I'm on the board of directors for the Destin Fishing Rodeo, and I'm going to tell you here's the deal. It has, in some years, the regulations are going to be better for federally permitted charter boats. In some years, the regulations are going to be better for state charter boats. In some years, it's going to be better for the recreational community. As far as I'm concerned as a board member, Mark Luciani is on the board with me. I think he will probably agree with me on this. If it's not open for everyone, we won't open it. We won't have a division for it. What would happen in this particular year, and we don't want to be in this position as board of directors, is pushing business to one sector. And this year, it would push business to state guide boats and not federal boats because it's only open for state boats and not open for federal. If it's open for everyone, we would do it. But if it's and there have been years when it would have been beneficial to every different user group, but never, so it has to be equitable.
How far still we have to be to go to federal wood?
9
9
miles.
miles.
That's it.
Yeah. But so no
Which is
snappers
a lot
won't be in
closer
the
than you
rodeo.
think.
Yes, sir. Ask me, I couldn't hear you.
Can you eat red snapper after you pass the 9 mile marker?
No. If you want to, the question was, when snapper opens in the fall, can you have them in your possession past 9 miles? The answer is no. You will get a ticket. So if you want to go out and go grouper and amberjack fishing, you need to go do that. Then come back inshore into state waters, catch your snapper, and come home. You cannot catch snapper, then go into federal waters and try to catch jacks and groupers, and then come home.
Federal permitting is a deal, and
Yeah.
it's expensive, and it's only charter.
In the federal boats, so the recreational and the state guide
fall
boats will
days.
get a fall snapper season. The federal boats will not.
Correct.
They got more days in the summer. When it's going to work out, the way it's going to work out, the recreational state guide boats will get 3 total days less than what the feds got when you add in the main season plus the fall season. It's going to be almost equal.
And then you subtract the weather days.
Well, that's for everybody.
Like somebody just laughed out loud back there. Yeah, right.
So next month's seminar will be, we tried it last year, we did it, it kind of worked okay. We're going to try it one more time, but it's going to be gearing up for the rodeo, because it'll be right there at the beginning of the rodeo. And we'll be covering a lot of different little topics and be as much question and answer as anybody wants to go over.
Last year we covered like every species of fish.
Yeah, and it's very haphazard, but it seemed like it was fun. I think most people had a good time doing it. So we want to try it one more time. There's no set topic. It's just, if we see that there's something cool going on, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about a few ways to target a few species for the rodeo. Something that most everybody can catch.
And little things too, like how people under 13 get a fishing rod.
Right.
And it seems like it doesn't matter if you weigh in a cigar minnow. You get it's just like little details or logistics that make the rodeo really fun.
Yeah. So that's what we'll cover next. Yes, sir.
You mentioned you've got a bunch of things that you traditionally catch bottom fishing out your daily bycatch. Did
Uh-huh.
you catch those on your tuna setups, or were you actually bottom fishing at the same time?
We were bottom fishing, but we caught more of it on our deepest tuna rod than we did bottom fishing.
And I think a lot of it has to do with the chum.
Yeah, because we were throwing chum, and when we first got there was fish on the screen, and there was stuff up in the column. But then it just, as we started chumming, it just kind of came alive. I may even. That's when we first got there, and it just came alive from that.
That was crazy at the end. I mean, the whole screen was full.
Yeah.
But that's
That's what it looked like when we first got there.
I think a lot of it has to do with chumming them up, getting them excited, and then obviously you hook one. And I think that fish, when you hook it, like it ate something and got hooked and knew something was wrong. So those fish will throw up and try to get that whatever happened out, and they're chumming the water for you. And it's especially when it's those crystal clear days and you're fishing shallow and you can see all the fish, and you hook one and you see them kind of throw up, and then you see all the other ones come over and start eating it, and they all come up and they all get really excited. And like mahi, you know the deal, when you hook one and you leave them hooked, the others get really excited. Like once you hook the first fish, everything changes. So I think today maybe a combination of hooking something halfway down, the chum on the surface, and then from that point on, I didn't use a lead. I didn't do anything. I'd hook a bait and throw it over the side and hand feed line out, and then watch my line start peeling off and close the bail and hold on.
You have a question from online. They said they saw people catching Blackfin tuna kayak fishing near the Navarre Pier. Is it typical they get that close to shore?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, and the reason that they down there at Navarre Pier, the kayakers and the paddle boarders, just east of the Navarre Pier, the question was an online question: do they normally catch them off paddle boards and kayaks? Well, there's a great place to actually go down there around Navarre Pier and tuna fish. They put in a section of kayak reefs. There's 500 of them in about a 1 square mile. Just east and 1 mile south, the Navarre Beach Pavilion right there. That's a great place to tuna fish. A great place.
Don't go over there. No, it's not. Damn it. Thanks, Tim.
Well, guys, we appreciate y'all coming. I think they're going to draw for some goodies up here, and while they're doing that, I'm going to come by and hand y'all out some discount cards. These you can use at the store, and this is good for a $20 off a $50 purchase.
Butcher all the names.
I'll make sure. I hope I got enough for everybody to have one.
All right, we got new hats too. Stretchy hats. Awesome. All right, who we have? There's a lot of paper in this today. Josh Osborne. Yeah.
I think y'all need two
Gee,
more.
were you guys here
Send
the
those
day
down
that
way,
we
too.
gave away jigs? Do you remember that? And then, yeah, man.
Never win anything.